The Australian accent is something we take for granted, but there's been little research done into what gives us our unique voice. Over the next few months, a nationwide study will attempt to turn that around, recording 1,000 voices from around the country. I caught up with the team leading the study in WA.
And there's going to be some words come up on the screen. They're going to be clearly in the middle, and just read the words off the screen as we go.
Shore, hone, ballot, drawing, closet, paddle, chicken.
We present them with individual words. We present them with a sequence of digits. We present them with, as shown here, a narrative that they read out. And then we also allow them to speak, as I'm speaking with you, more conversationally. So we capture some of the artifacts of conversational speech, like the ums and ahs and the hesitations and pauses, and how people will naturally interact and speak with other people.
Once upon a time, there was a young rat named Arthur who couldn't make up his mind. Whenever the other rats asked him if he would like to go out hunting with them, he would answer in a soft voice, "I don't know."
In this small study room at the University of WA, the Australian voice is being captured.
They lived in a very dark and dreary old place.
100 voices will be recorded in this room over the next few months, with identical projects being conducted at universities around the country. The aim is to take a snapshot of the Australian accent in its many forms and variations at this exact moment in time. For researchers, the project is well overdue, with very little information around about what makes an Australian voice.
There are not that many databases around the world which have both audio and visual information, and certainly there aren't any of Australian speech.
The sessions are being overseen by engineers and linguists, the former interested in the potential for better voice recognition programs, the latter in identifying what makes us sound Australian. More specifically for researchers here, the project could also pinpoint what makes the WA voice unique.
The ends of words in things like matter, for instance, I would say they're pronounced differently in West Australian English than they are in Victorian English, for instance. Until we record these voices and run actual empirical research, there's no way to say it's just impressionistic. You really want to be able to measure whether there's any differences acoustically, and so the Austalk is going to be the best way to do that.
8567 3012 5678 0429.
The study also aims to chart the development and evolution of the Australian voice. By recording older and younger Australians, it will attempt to define how our accent has changed over time.
The way people speak has evolved even in the last 30 years. And in fact, if you listen to newsreels from the 40s and 50s, it's a completely different accent.
Fatigue, syrup, hoot, pet, shore.
David Hawkes has a voice that echoes the Australian accent of years ago. It's a voice that will be familiar to many. He started his radio career in 1955 and worked in the industry for nearly half a decade.
I came from a home where we all spoke well. Mum was a school teacher and insisted not only on good grammar, but on correct use of our voices.
The rats shrieked and their fur stood on end with fear and horror. "This won't do," said their leader with a scowl. "We can't stay cooped up here any longer."
David Hawkes says the radio voices of his era were highly articulate.
All of the people on radio had good voices and spoke well. On commercial radio and on the ABC, they all spoke what I call educated Australian. They didn't have broad Australian accents. They didn't have plummy voices and very English. They were just well-spoken people.
This is how we kick Fridays off, and I quite like it. Oddball News with James DeLeo.
Do you like pumpkin? Well, I love pumpkin, so let's get this thing on.
So how much does a wedding licence cost? I'd love to know.
Anything with the word wedding attached to it, they crank it up. And that's not cool.
It's a voice that's clearly changed in the time that's passed.
Yeah, I think the idea of the site's brilliant. But, I mean, what would 48 out of 50 non-vegetarians be doing there?
Researchers say our accent has shifted from what's been described as a cultivated accent to a more general Australian English.
There's a sense of belonging to Australia, there's a sense of nationality that is growing, and that is tied into a particular way of speaking Australian. So there's a pride in language. There is a more positive attitude to sounding Australian maybe than 40 years ago.
There is a change, and strangely enough, Claire, I welcome it, because I want us to be identifiably Australian. And I think it's good that young people are sounding Australian.
Just then, the old rat caught sight of young Arthur. He wasn't in the line, and he wasn't exactly outside it. He just stood nearby.
With the project set to capture the new Australian sound, David Hawke sits comfortably with the fact that the voices of his era may not be heard again.
I think that the generation that I represent, and that's the 70s plus, I think that with us we'll go this way of speaking English, and fair enough. That's what happens.